Welcome back, everyone. I'm so happy to be here today with Stephanie Carter. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Kathy.
Of course, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So first, let me properly introduce you to Stephanie. Stephanie Carter is the founder of The Verse, Her Next Verse. The Verse is a media platform designed and delivered by grown-ups for grown-ups, built on real talk, action-ready beyond the masses tips, and original ideas. It's a mashup of Stephanie's decades of leadership in business, public service, advocacy, and the arts. Prior to founding The Verse, Stephanie served as general partner of the growth equity firm ABS Capital Partners, raising $1.6 billion for the firm's funds in her 25-year tenure, just one accomplishment amongst many that bettered the firm. As wife to former Secretary of Defense Ash Carter, Stephanie seized the opportunity to travel the world and make a difference for military families and veterans, earning the Distinguished Public Service Award from the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staffs in 2017. So if you aren't getting this already, Stephanie is a multi-talented badass. And in founding The Verse, she realized she was one in an army of grown-ups seeking reinvention, and she hopes that by sharing her setbacks and wins, she can help people to view their second half with optimism and excitement. And I'm really excited to talk about that more today. So again, thanks for being here. So to start, Stephanie, I'd love to hear more about your leaving corporate America and how you knew it was time for the next thing and what made you go out on your own.
Definitely, like anything, I know that we love to reduce things into nice, clean, crisp stories, but it wasn't clean or crisp. We were doing a fundraise at the fund, which was a challenge. As you know, that's the type of thing where it's very dependent on what's going on in the markets, and you're kind of having to make your way through. And so there was a point during that challenging time that I really had to think about, what if we don't get this done? And that was scary, but I had started thinking, I would think every night on my way home, what I would do with the people I was managing and how I would, kind of deal with what might be an outcome. And, I started thinking, okay, I'll leave, right? Because I've kind of reached a certain place, and I will allow the woman I was mentoring to get a battlefield promotion, and then she'll be able to go somewhere else. And I would really sort this out on my drive home, and that's how my mind was working. But it was honestly the first time that I actually verbalized that I might leave. And that was enough. That was a big, big thing to really ever say, because I don't think I ever let myself think it or believe it, because I was such a company cheerleader. I really loved the firm. I still do. But I had never even thought of anything else, but I would live out my days there. And at the same time, I had been working with an executive coach. And, when you're working with a coach, someone as wonderful as someone like you keep getting better and you keep mastering what you're doing. And so I was really managing better. I was climbing the ladder and striving upwards. And I would say the last thing that happened was that we did get through the fundraise, but my mind didn't stop thinking about, wow, there's this whole world that I haven't even opened my eyes to that I could pursue. And that was both exciting, thrilling, and it was also daunting. And so I think flash forward, I decided not to make any big decisions after we got the fundraise done, just because you're just in a mode where you shouldn't make big decisions. But I hadn't stopped thinking about what else I could do. And I was starting to recognize that I was hitting my head on the ceiling. There just wasn't another move for me upwards. And so I really had to think about how compelling is it going to be to just keep doing something that I'm already good at. And I'm a big growth person, and that probably wasn't going to be satisfying. Then going out on my own, sorry, this is like a long, I'm taking
this
you
is
on,
great. Thank you.
I'm taking you on Homer's Odyssey here. But then I thought I would work in sports or entertainment, two fields that I love. I love the product. And I got a lot of meetings. And so I don't feel like I didn't get to explore those fields. But when I got in the room with people, it was really evident to me that they did not know what to do with an accomplished executive who was 50 years old. They would have really known what to do if I was 22 and, hey, can I get an entry level job? And can you teach me the big leagues? But they didn't really know what to do with someone who had been successful in one field and was thinking about going to another. And it made me think, this just hasn't been the norm, that people would be walking in their offices at a certain age. And it made me think, why aren't we exploring this? Because we're really the first generation that understands and can make decisions around our life being a really long one, and probably not lasting in one career to 65 and then calling it quits and going to, a nice home on the beach. I mean, I think that's fine if that's what you want to do, but clearly there's a lot more available to us. And it seems really crazy that you would pull the ripcord when you've reached this level of understanding about yourself and you kind of grow into your own skin. Why wouldn't you want to optimize that? I mean, to me, it's when you're at your best.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I just want to highlight some of the things that you mentioned in your response, because one of the things we talk about around sustainable ambition is how important it is to pay attention. And many of us aren't paying attention as we go through our careers, and we're not listening to those voices that are popping up saying like, hey, something's off here, or I'm ready for that next growth challenge. And that's what I heard you describing in terms of your drive home. And, once you accomplish what you had set out to accomplish, that the fact that that voice hadn't gone away, and that you continued to listen to it and to explore it. And I think you shared with me before too, like you didn't jump immediately. You really took some time to kind of explore. And even in terms of what you're describing, in terms of, hey, I thought my passion was going to be here, so let me go explore that. And you learned through that process. So I'm wondering if you have any insights from just the journey you took to kind of getting to this step of starting your own thing, that you might have some advice and counsel for people as they're starting themselves to perhaps feel that like kind of inkling of like, I think there might be something more here and I might be ready for what's next.
Yeah. I know this isn't available to everybody, and so I don't want to be presumptive, but I would definitely say get a coach, because your need to get outside of your own head and see things clearly is best reflected through another person. You also are going to need an accountability mechanism. I think the biggest thing, and it's funny why it was important to me, but in the end, it ended up being the right thing, is, yeah, I did explore all this while I already was in a role. And I had a couple of friends who had left their professions, and I had really seen them sort of sprint right up till the end of their time with their companies and not really have a sense of what they wanted to do next. And there was this big presumption, I'll figure it out when I stop. I'll figure it out when I stop. Don't do that. It is already going to be enough of a disorientation, a challenge, a sort of walk in, squishy waters, to leave what you have been doing for a long time, or to leave a world you've known, or to leave a definition of yourself that you've understood. And so I would say that having figured this out, it made my leaving easier in the sense that I was able to clearly state why I was leaving, where I was going, what I was doing, even if that was just a concept at the time. And it let my partners, who I cared very deeply for, know that I wasn't going to another firm, or I wasn't, it wasn't something they could have done. But I think that it also gave me a little bit of an anchor, which you really need if you're going to step away from something you've been doing for a long time, where you've had mastery and, you've had a kind of environment and cocoon. And I think my biggest piece of advice, and I've said this to a couple people since that have been in similar situations, is you will not figure it out. You are not going to leave this world, go to some room, sit in front of a whiteboard and start figuring it out. You're not going to do it. And so I really just did a little more each week, and tried to investigate, but was working with a coach the whole time. So, I had homework. I had someone to call bullshit on me if I wasn't sort of, starting to charter chart a path out of what I was doing. So.
Yeah, really wise counsel to kind of start before you think you need to, and really start to set that path and pay attention and get into exploration mode is what I'm hearing too. And one of the things you noted as well was this idea of kind of giving yourself an anchor. And for many people who step away from a corporate world and that title, right, and that business card and being able to describe yourself through your work, which many of us tend to do, when you step away from that, oftentimes people have a challenge with personal identity. And I know on the verse you talk about like creating your own trademark, creating your own personal brand. Do you have any counsel or ideas around like the importance of doing something like that as well to help with that anchoring as you step away from your corporate role?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, even if you aren't thinking of starting your own thing, you really should get a handle on not only I think your brand in every sense of the word, what you stand for, what you like, what you don't like. I mean, even if your intention is to leave a place and go to somewhere new, you shouldn't be the same person you've been, right? You have this opportunity to reinvent and relook at. And I think to get to the heart of what you are and what value you're offering. I mean, I actually, when I was sort of in job seeking mode, I had worked with a mutual friend of ours who introduced us that on some personal branding. And I mean, people were really blown away in the way that I could articulate what I thought my core strengths were and my values, because it's really stupid to write a resume when you've been doing something 25 years. I mean, you're not going to be able to tick through all the experiences year in, year out. Yes, you can show some forward progression and some accomplishment, but you really need to say, what is it that you have on offer? And I think that does take almost a branding exercise to say, what makes you different from other people that might be kind of wanting to join something. So yeah, that was a very worthwhile exercise. It turned out that I was able to parlay that into the core of, what the verse became, because the verse is an expression of me and it is about some of my brand. But I think it's a worthwhile exercise for anybody.
Yeah. I love that idea too. This notion of at some point blow up the resume. I mean, it feels so antiquated and doesn't seem like it really captures who we are as individuals. And there's so much antiquated about, the work world and how people need to fit into boxes, even what you were saying as you were interviewing for other potential roles in other industries, and the fact that companies don't really know how to take in experienced people and to integrate them into the workforce. So it's just another example of how do you present yourself differently? And like you're saying, the value that you can bring to the party.
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, I would say I always got a call back. I had like a 4 or 5 page PowerPoint. And it was visual and it was designed and it was beautiful. And I always got a lot of response from that. And for people to say, I feel like I know you a little bit, like before we would talk. So yeah, blow up the resume. I mean, the thing I used to think when I was hiring people, and maybe I was a little bit different in this way, is I would think about what is the mission of the job. And by the way, these people don't know what to do with talent when it walks in the door, and then they turn around and bemoan the talent shortage. But I would always think about, if I was hiring someone in a year, if I was happy with that person, what would they have gotten done? So I tried to get past the job description to what the core mission of the job was, and what really the competencies were going to be, and what needed to be to get done. And then it helped me think differently about candidates, because I would be able to think about, oh, well, what I really need from this person is for them to be very situationally aware and create connections. And maybe they had had a different experience, maybe not in my field, but they had done the practice of creating relationships or being situationally aware. And I think that is where hiring should go. I mean, it's honestly not my, not my problem to have anymore. But I think being on the other side of it helped me to say, I'm not going to present myself through a resume. I just think that's ridiculous for someone who's been working 25 years.
Yeah, I just want to punctuate because I really love that advice. And I also think it's important. It's not uncommon for me to hear people at this point in their career as well to be concerned about ageism and how they show up to employers. And I think part of that problem is even in how we present ourselves. And so that's what I like about what you're sharing here too, is, break out of that mold and out of that norm and how you present yourself, and consider, a more impactful way to really tell your story and demonstrate the value that you bring after 25 years likely of experience. So, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what we're going to do to break this ageism, except for, at least at the Verse, our mission is to put more positive imagery out there of what this age really looks like. People will say to me, oh, you don't look 52. And it's like, this is what 52 looks like. I don't know. But I think the challenge is that the people that are going to be doing the hiring in a lot of cases are younger. And there is this idea that, I hate the idea of like, you're too experienced, like you're too experienced for this job, or you might be too much. And I think there's a resistance to that, because when you have people that are hiring that are in their 30s, we all remember, or at least I remember, that being a time of insecurity, right? I think that's a time where you think you know everything and everyone's just not getting you, and and you don't want to be challenged because I think it's a phase you go through when you're going through that stretch of your career where you're like, am I going to kind of take off? And you have your elbows out, who else is trying to take off at the same time. And I think as you get more accomplished, you mellow on that. You don't feel the need. You need to take credit for everything. You don't feel so insecure. But I worry, because I think you are putting people in a position when they're at that phase in their career, and they may be hiring, and they may feel really challenged by someone who, instead of saying, look at this great gift of wisdom, right? This is someone who's seen some stuff. I remember when, I worked in, the financial world. And I remember whenever the markets got choppy, I wanted to talk to people who had worked in the 70s, because they would tell you, like, it was bad news every goddamn day in the 70s, right? Like, it was just bad news on top of bad news. It was the gas shortage. It was the Iran hostage, it was everything. And that felt comforting to me, to be able to talk to some people who had lived through some stuff and could really help me contextualize it and be like, it's not that bad. This is nothing. And so I think people have to think about hiring people that are older, like, wow, I might have this person around who's really seen some stuff and could really help me and could give me wisdom. I worry about that, though. I really worry about that, where we are with that.
I agree. And I'm sure you've heard of Chip Conley's book, Wisdom at Work, The Making of a Modern Elder.
I live for it. I live for it. It was one of the first books I read kind of at the beginning of all of this. And I have a dog-eared copy that is, highlighted. And unfortunately, last year I was supposed to be on a panel at South by Southwest with him. And it would have been a dream, but unfortunately we ended up with COVID. But he's so wise and wonderful, and just a wonderful advocate for, companies not letting all this wisdom walk out the door, which I fear that they are right now.
I don't disagree. And I think, you just also shared this article with Rose Marcario, who is the former CEO of Patagonia. And she's talking about this third act, where it talks about the stage of life. It's really your time to hand over day-to-day responsibilities to the next generation and to become an advisor and a teacher. And I think that's where people are getting things a little bit wrong in terms of how they integrate different, I hate to say generations, because it's like, geez, I work with 20-year-olds. I don't feel that far away from them. One that I'm working with recently, she almost fell off her chair when she heard my age. And it's kind of like, you don't always notice the differences. And we're really doing ourselves a disservice by not leveraging talent, regardless of what number is associated with your age. So yeah, I really appreciate this point around, how do we really leverage all talent, regardless of age?
Yeah, one of the core sort of values, I've been working on our mission, vision, and values, but one of our core values, at least we've had since the beginning, is we just don't indulge in intergenerational shade. Like, we don't like it. I really think that, a lot of jobs that need doing and problems we need to solve in this world is going to take all of our generational strengths, and there's a role for everyone to play. And I think there's this presumption that, and you've seen a little bit of this even play out in Congress, that, it's time for the old people to step aside and just get out of here. And, to me, I kind of think about it as, the Nancy Pelosi is like an amazing fundraiser. Like, why wouldn't you use her for that? And she has been amazing on sort of navigating and negotiating a bunch of really, really thorny things. And this isn't to bring anyone's politics into play, but I'm saying that, why don't we use people for what they're really good at, instead of this idea, if they don't get out of the chair, that I'm never going to have my shot. Now, that also calls on all of us to be more generous and sharing in our own pursuits, right? To, who the clients are that are cool and don't mind if you bring someone in the room to listen in, or to, get some exposure. I always think, I have a doctor that is also a teaching doctor, and she would ask me, do you mind if I'm teaching today? Do you mind if I bring in another doctor? And I would say, no, absolutely. And I think who those, and I would like to think it was because I'm cool and, I'm a patient she felt like she could do that with. But who those people are on, and I'm sorry, I did turn off my text. It's dinging anyway. Who those people are that in your work world. So it is on you, when you do become senior at a business, to bring younger people into the room and to give them some of the spotlight and give them exposure. So I think on both sides, we could all be doing better at really navigating these kind of differences.
Yeah, I so appreciate what you're bringing up. And this is one of the things that I think about as well with regard to sustainable ambition is this notion of that things change from decade to decade. And it might not be right on the 30-year-old mark, 40-year-old mark, 50-year-old mark. But the reality is our satisfaction, our ambition, what we're looking for from work and our careers changes. And because we don't talk about that, it's not normalized to think about how one can or should be navigating their careers at these different times. And that could be even if you choose to have children and you're for a man or a woman, and how you navigate that while you have younger children, say, or as you get later in your career and what you might be looking for that's different at this point in time. So I think this idea of kind of part of what you're describing is like, there's a lot of layers to it actually in what you're describing too, because it's also like, hey, once you get more senior in an organization, remember like what your role is at this point in time and how it is to like kind of bring other people along. So it's just to say for me, like that, I think there needs to be more normalization of these different ways of looking at careers, how they evolve over time. And that it's not just this one note kind of like ladder that you keep climbing up, until the end, that you might have to take some side steps and what have you. So,
yeah, my husband used to describe it as like jungle gyms, that people want to kind of move in different ways. And yeah, I think we do put too much on sort of the march straight up the hill instead of, the meandering path that is kind of moving you forward. I always remember when I was managing people that were having children, it was really hard to see them be a hard charger and come back and realize, it almost felt like when a dog kind of runs until they hit an electric fence, they're like, oh, and they realize that they can't, run as hard or do as much. And, I would really try to get people focused on what were incremental steps forward. I think incremental growth is way underappreciated. And so it was kind of about helping them ground themselves in some achievable goals for the year, given that their life had dramatically changed. And the other thing I think is, to really a lot of companies talk about how they're so friendly to people having children and whatever, but there is still significant evidence that you're sort of seen as, people wonder if you're going to be as sharp or you're going to take a step back. And I think there's a lot of unspoken expectation. And so it's only natural that that person won't articulate what's going on, that they're having trouble, that it's a challenge to balance. And, my thing is that if we can't talk about it, we can't fix it, right? Like if you can't talk about it, you can't fix it. And so it was really to say, hey, let's have a results-oriented work environment. If you want to be home for dinner and bath time, and that's the best time for you, and you want to get back on your computer at 9:00, like that's fine. We just need the work done, right? You don't need to be in my face. We need to make it more workable. But I do think that there are times that people need to be more encouraged about making incremental change and incremental progress, and not thinking that every year they've got to, kind of shoot the moon.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I wanted to, on this idea of growth, because I know growth is really important to you, I want to come back to this idea of kind of going from mastery to beginner. We were having an exchange about an article on Bloomberg from last year, end of last year, where they talked about this idea that success is fueled by like grit, passion, and a growth mindset. Yet they have data that shows like as we age, passion can wane for some. Grit actually increases, I think, because we get more experience. We've gone through the trenches and have a lot of experience under our belt. But that it's really that growth mindset that declines for people past their early 50s. And you've noted the importance of really embracing a beginner's mindset. And I think it's not easy to go from being such a master at something to kind of being a beginner again. It really requires this mindset shift. So, do you have any advice on how one actually does that? How does one move from kind of stepping away from being a master and being open to being a beginner again?
I think first and foremost, it's awareness, right? And I think that what took me a while was to even figure out what was happening, that things like felt harder or they took longer and there wasn't awareness on my part. Hey, you're doing something you haven't even done before. And of course you're not doing it well or killing it. Because I think I did have I think the grit part is that gives you a self-possession, right? That you can probably get through a lot of things, right? So that at least lets you know that, okay, like what's the worst that can happen? I've been through a lot of stuff before. But at the same time, I think that didn't really click for me, that things were feeling hard. I was being really hard on myself. Like, why aren't you doing this amazingly? And it finally clicked for me. Oh, like you're back at Grasshopper. You're no longer master of this. And I think it's just curiosity. I mean, I think it's awareness and curiosity. I mean, I'm relentlessly curious. I'm that type of person in life. I'm always reading or listening to podcasts about how things work. And I always want to know more. And so I think that really helps. And I think that Chip Conley talks about it too. I think really just fostering your own curiosity. But I think it's also to stop being so, I don't want to say self-centered, but self-conscious. No one's looking at you. No one cares that you're not getting things right. That's really about you feeling that you should be getting things right. So I'd say first and foremost, be nice to yourself. And don't expect that, when on the days that things have been hard, I will remind myself that the reason that I left my former job is because I wasn't growing anymore. And while it feels nice to sit in a place of mastery and be able to do a bunch of things and be in your flow, that isn't growth. And so I think just understanding that I had taken a step back and, like I said, not being so self-conscious about it. I interviewed a woman for our newsletter a couple issues ago, and she's fantastic, but she decided to go to DJ school at age 40 something. And she is now this amazing DJ, like opens for D Nice and is the Today Show DJ and is just fantastic. And she was saying the same thing, like, stop worrying what other people will think. Like, it's you're the only one that cares about it. It's not everybody else. So I think, we're all always reaching for this place where we don't care what other people think.
I think that's right.
I'll call you when I get there, but
yes, I agree. I love that. The School of Life talks about this idea that confidence is really when we're comfortable in our own skin. And I think that's part of what you're describing, but I think it's also not, like you're saying, who's looking at you and whether or not you're getting it right, as opposed to just growing into and learning and getting better over time. And it seems to me that, like, as adults, I think we forget what the learning process is like, in that you fall down a lot. You learn by doing that. I think we assume that as adults, we should just be able to pick something up. And when we pick it up, be experts at it and excellent at it from the get-go. And we forget about what really that learning journey is like. And that's what I hear you describing a bit.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I think it's actually two different sides of that coin. We both, we're both arrogant about our ability to pick up new things. And we're also, to the point in the Bloomberg article, we're fearful of, this whole old dogs can't learn new tricks, or, you see people, shy away from things and say, I'm 50 something. Like, I'm not going to, if I haven't picked it up by now, I'm not going to do it. And I think that is, where people cut off their growth mindset, because they just presume that even at 50 or 60 or 70, that they can't change something about themselves or their life. And as you know, the core of the growth mindset is believing in your ability to actually change things. So yeah, I think it's kind of schizophrenic. We both think we're going to do awesome at it, and think, why bother? There's another new book out, I think maybe I sent you, called Beginners, and it's a guy who writes about his learning to surf in his middle age. And one of the things they say is, like, you can't look down at the surfboard when you're getting up. You need to, like, find a spot on the shore so that you can actually be upright. If you're looking down, you're gonna go down. And he found that for people that are middle-aged learning a new sport, one of the biggest problems is they're so self-conscious about what they're doing. Instead of, if you watch a kid learning how to ski, they just will go tumble down the hill. So I think, if we can get in touch with that part of ourselves, I don't really care. I'm learning how to play basketball, and I am by no means good, and I miss a ton of shots. And my trainer, who was teaching me before COVID, but he was teaching me, he had played college basketball, and if I can go make an ass out of myself, because it's something I really like to do. It's not about whether I'm great at it or not. So yeah. I think we all need to kind of get to that place, which is hard.
Yeah. But it's a great practice even to give ourselves something like that. Like, challenge yourself to try something where you're not, where you're picking up a new sport or learning an instrument or something to that effect, to just kind of humble yourself around the learning process. So, I'm not recalling the name of the book, but another surfing story, but it was a woman who had been really super amazing, publisher, and at the top of her game, had her own imprint, etc. And I think the name of the book is something like "Suck at Something," that she is never going to be a great surfer, and just having something in her life that she is not good at and may never be good at is a really great thing to have in your life. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to make sure to talk a little bit about the verse as we start to come to a close. And it's a resource to support grownups at this stage of life, and to foster people being curious, as you highlight, and being in action. And I'm wondering, we've talked a lot about this today, but, why do you think this is so needed today? And kind of what space did you see missing in this dialogue that you really wanted to fill and provide people with information and resources to kind of navigate this stage of life?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, the initial discussion we had about, just sort of understanding that we were really this first generation who was starting to see how long our parents were living, and maybe how long our parents were working, and maybe see choices that our parents had made about the second half of their lives, where they hadn't had the forethought that they were actually, that when they stopped working, that they were going to have another 30 years or 40 years. And so I saw that trend first and foremost, and certainly saw a need for people to just a guide for what I was going through, that, you might find yourself reinventing yourself at age 40 or 50. And, I think that in some ways, the generations younger than us are a little bit more prepared in that they don't think they're necessarily going to stay a place for a cajillion years. So, I mean, we certainly haven't been geared that way. But I think also just in the market, I think there is just a dearth of people even writing to this age or showing imagery of this age or showing stories of this age. So I thought that was a mismatch. I think something like 10% of the advertising sort of is spent on people our age, and yet we hold over 70% of the wealth in this country. So there's a disconnect there. And so I thought there was just like, I wasn't picking up things that weren't written in this kind of millennial or Gen Z targeted zone. And it seemed that so much of media had sort of gone that way. So I thought just someone who had a voice that was talking to people as if they had lived some life already and, met them where they were. So I think those were the things that I saw missing in the marketplace. And, hopefully as we go on, there continue to be, more outlets that are addressing people at this age. But for now, we just really saw that there was a little bit of a white space there.
Yeah, that's great. So yes, go to the Verse to get some communication and media that is actually speaking to, say, Gen X, because I don't know what it is, but no one talks about Gen X. We're really the forgotten generation. It's very interesting.
Well, yes. I mean, we sit, I'm sure you've seen the meme that they sent around that is like a CNN, they were talking about actually millennial burnout, but it was a CNN graphic, and it said the silent generation, the baby boomers, and the millennials, and Gen Z. And I said, that's the most Gen X thing ever. But I think, there wasn't, I think we're a really interesting generation. And I think, sure, we didn't come out of school with anything as pronounced as the financial crisis or certainly COVID right now. You have to feel for these people coming out of school right now. But at the same time, there was sort of, when we were leaving college, there was a different kind of financial crisis and malaise. And, a lot of the people our age had to kind of go invent jobs for themselves, and they ended up creating things in the internet. And, a lot of the companies that have pushed technology and creativity forward. And so I think people don't really, understand that. But in the same way, I think that we're going to really silently rewrite the book about what your second half of life looks like. And, if we do it quietly and people don't pay attention to us, that's fine. But, my hope, if I do something good with the Verse, I hope first and foremost, it's a successful business. It's not, for my vanity or anything. But secondly, I really hope that people in their 30s right now will think differently about this period of their life. They won't dread it, and they'll have planned for it. They will have some sort of blueprint of, oh, okay, I can try a new career when I get here. Or, I hope we can normalize that a lot more.
Yes, here. I love, that's a great summary of a lot of what I believe too, and what I think is so important. I think is a great legacy, frankly, to leave for others as they think about, the next chapter and the second act in their own lives and career. To wrap up, I'd love to just ask you a couple rapid fire questions, and then we'll close things out. But I'll go through these quickly. But one is, how do you define success for yourself?
I think I think about the normal things that are around success, right? It's your ability to influence things, and in this case, it's going to be my business, right? But I think also at this stage of life is, do I feel happy when I wake up? Am I bounding out of bed? I forget who said it, but it's someone said, you should be jumping out of bed in the morning and jumping in bed at night, kind of with the same enthusiasm. And I think that's basically saying that you like your home life and you like your pursuit or your craft. And to me, that's what feels like success. If I can find, it's not every day is going to be lollipops and ice cream, but if you can find joy in what you're doing, I think that's success. And it sounds trite, but I think you can appreciate it more when you're this age, that that you can keep climbing. But if you're miserable, that doesn't work. And you're not growing, that doesn't work.
What advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Take more risk. I think, funny enough, having worked in an industry that is based on taking risk, I think women are more risk averse, and that doesn't have to be a bad thing, because when women and men combine their risk profiles, they make really good decisions. But I think I was very, I worry about this also for people that are coming out in these various disruptions. I think I felt lucky to be where I was and to have a job. And I don't think that I ever thought, I could jump and do something else, or I could try something and maybe I'd fail at it. And, I worry about that for people that came out in the financial crisis, that they may be oriented that way, where you have everyone telling you you're lucky to have a job. And I feel that way for maybe kids that are coming out now. But definitely take more risk.
What's your best tip for juggling multiple priorities?
I used to like to say that none of us are good at juggling, first and foremost, that we all overestimate our skill at multitasking. But I think, I would go to all these conferences when I was working in the private equity world, and there'd always come around this conversation about work-life balance. There is no balance. So we should stop putting that out there as something to be achieved, because we're just going to drive ourselves crazy. Sometimes your work is barking louder, and sometimes your home is barking louder, or personal life is barking louder, and you just need to attend to what's really pulling you, and you need to be okay with that. I think that when Ash got his Secretary of Defense job, which was a big job, he had already had deputy. And I think the mistake that I made when he had been Deputy Secretary of Defense was I kind of tried to pretend that nothing had changed in my life, maybe similar to someone having a child or something. Nothing had changed. And I was trying to continue to say yes to everything and to show how much I hadn't changed, to my own detriment. And when he became secretary, I really realized I need to keep my world really small, because I need to conserve my energy to support him in this massive thing he's doing. And, I've got to trim some of the things that, I'm saying yes to. And none of us likes to not do that. And, we all, feel like we want to be there for everybody, want to say yes to everything. And I think that, I think you've really got to listen up to what's going on and what's pulling you the most. And I think during those times, you just have to crunch down the other stuff. By the same token, I had someone who worked for me, and, her friends she had young children. Her extended family wanted her sort of traveling every weekend. And she was just really killing herself, because it was enough to sort of keep up with this growing family and a really tough job. So I think you got to pay attention, and you can't balance them. It's not going to happen.
I love the straight talk. And I think that's what people will get from the verse as well. And this has been such a fabulous conversation, Stephanie. Thank you so much for being on with me. What's a final piece of advice you'd love to leave our listeners with?
I think one that is kind of hitting me recently is to just kind of embrace not doing things well. I think you're never going to take some risk and try something if you're not okay with making some mistakes. And I think even going into starting a company, I thought, oh my God, I've seen hundreds of growth companies, and I know all the mistakes to make, and think that if I'm not making mistakes, I'm not taking enough risk. So I think just getting okay with not being perfect and making some mistakes. I know that sounds trite, but it's something I'm reminding myself of lately.
Now, I love you punctuating that, because it just gets back to that growth mindset idea and the beginner mindset. So I think it just says how important that is. So what can we do for you, and where can people find you to keep in touch?
The best thing everyone can do is to subscribe to our newsletter. It comes every other Sunday, and I think that it is, if I do say so, I think it's a great Sunday read, and it'll really help you kickstart your week. You can sign up for it at www.theversemedia.com. And on Instagram, we're at The Verse Media. And you can find us on LinkedIn under The Verse Media. So I would say follow along, but certainly sign up for our newsletter, because I think, we'll just get better the more. We like to say our DMs, our minds and hearts are always open. So I think we'll just get better the more input and, feedback we have from our audience. So
wonderful. Well, thank you again, Stephanie. I'm so pleased to have you here with me today, and really appreciate all the insight and wisdom you shared with us.
Well, thank you. I love what you're doing, and I really appreciate you being so generous as to have me on.
Of course. Find more inspiring interviews and get show notes for this episode at sustainableambition.com/podcast. Make sure you don't miss an episode or my insider tips, guides, and tools by signing up for Sustainable Ambition Forum, my twice monthly newsletter. Sign up at sustainableambition.com/subscribe. Thanks again for joining me. Speak with you next time.